house forever to...
Lucas, nagpa-practice ka ba magsisinungaling siya?
Would you still love me today?
What happens when survival meets paranoia in the wilderness? Today on Sign Galaxy, we're diving deep into Outside, 2024, a movie that'll make you question who you can really trust. Stay tuned for hidden facts, behind-the-scenes secrets, and my full review. Outside is a 2024 Philippine post-apocalyptic drama horror film written and directed by Carlo Ledesma. It features Sid Lucero, Beauty Gonzalez, Marco Masa, and Aiden Tyler Padu in the leading roles. The story follows a family struggling to survive as they attempt to escape a devastating zombie outbreak by seeking refuge in the father's old childhood farmhouse. The able family of Francis, his wife Iris, and their sons Joshua and Lucas escape a zombie outbreak in the city and seek refuge at Francis' parents' mansion located on a sugarcane plantation. Upon arrival, Francis discovers his father and a servant dead by suicide after infection, while his mother has turned into a zombie. After killing her, Francis and his family take shelter in the house. Francis begins suffering from nightmares about the abuse he endured from his father in the basement as a child. His marriage also deteriorates after he discovers Iris's infidelity and learns that his older brother, Diego, is actually Joshua's biological father. A few days later, Iris persuades Francis to look for a safer place to stay, but they are forced to turn back after encountering a zombie-infested bridge and abandon their van. Later, Francis goes back to retrieve the vehicle but returns instead with fuel for the mansion's generator. Joshua learns about a supposed safe zone over the radio and tries to convince his father to go there, but Francis dismisses the idea and instead teaches him how to shoot a gun. The sound of gunfire attracts a massive horde of zombies, trapping the family inside until Diego arrives and draws the undead away using his vehicle. The next day, Diego offers to accompany the family to the safe zone, but Francis, harboring resentment toward his brother for being favored by their parents and for his affair with Iris, refuses his help and drives him off at gunpoint. Before leaving, Diego drops off a map showing the way to the safe zone, should Francis change his mind. Francis overhears Iris speculating that the zombies are weakening over time. Becoming increasingly paranoid, he fakes an attack outside, barricades the mansion, and locks his family inside. During dinner, Joshua finds Diego's map and confronts his father, prompting Iris to confess that she wants to leave him. In turn, Francis reveals that Joshua is not his biological son before burning the map in front of them. That night, a wounded soldier named Corcura arrives seeking refuge and confirms that the number of zombies is decreasing. He also reveals that Diego, who had guided him to the mansion, was killed by the undead. The next morning, Joshua, fed up with his father's erratic behavior, decides to leave. Francis descends into madness, kills Corcura with a hammer, and locks Iris and Lucas in the basement. That night, Lucas pretends to be sick to lure Francis downstairs, allowing Iris to stab him and trap him in the basement before escaping with Lucas. Francis attempts to pursue them but is paralyzed by memories of his father imprisoning him. Meanwhile, Iris and Lucas are forced back into the mansion by a reanimated Diego, who bites Lucas. Hearing their screams, Francis overcomes his trauma, breaks free from the basement, and kills Diego, but collapses when he realizes that Lucas has been bitten. Iris is left to amputate her son's infected limb alone. Francis later returns to the checkpoint to retrieve the van, but Joshua, mistaking his bloodied and staggering father for a zombie, shoots him. Realizing his mistake, Joshua tearfully begs for forgiveness. In his final moments, Francis acknowledges Joshua as his son before dying. Joshua then takes the van and drives back to rescue Iris and Lucas. The casting of Outside, 2024, directed by Carlo Ledesma, stands as a deliberate fusion of established Filipino acting talents and emerging voices, crafted to elevate a zombie apocalypse narrative into a probing exploration of familial fractures and psychological unraveling. At the helm of this ensemble is Sid Lucero, embodying the patriarch Francis with a brooding intensity that anchors the film's descent from survival thriller to domestic nightmare. Born Timothy Mark Pimintiliganman on March 12, 1981, in Manila, Philippines, Lucero hails from a storied showbiz dynasty. His father, the late Mark Gill, was a prolific character actor, while his mother, Bing Pimentel, contributed to the industry's creative undercurrents, and siblings like Sunshine Dizon and Max Eigenman have carved parallel paths in film and theater. This lineage isn't mere nepotism, it's a crucible that honed Lucero's craft from an early age, exposing him to the raw mechanics of performance amid the chaotic rhythm of Philippine entertainment. His entry into acting came in 2004 with the GMA7 soap opera Hanggang Kailan, a melodrama that demanded emotional versatility, quickly followed by a lead antagonist turn in ABS-CBN's Fantaserie Cristela, where he navigated supernatural intrigue with a menacing charisma that foreshadowed his affinity for morally ambiguous leads. By the mid-2000s, Lucero had transitioned to cinema, debuting in Lev Diaz's Jeremias, 2006, a sprawling art-house epic that tested his endurance in long takes and existential silence, earning him early acclaim for portraying quiet desperation, a skill he refines masterfully as Francis in Outside. Lucero's filmography is a tapestry of indie grit and mainstream Polish, spanning over 50 credits that reveal his chameleon-like range. In Donsal, 2006, he played a fisherman grappling with loss in a whale shark haven, infusing the role with a tender vulnerability that contrasted his later, edgier turns, such as the imprisoned anti-hero in The Inmate, 2007, directed by Zeki Ramos, where his raw physicality and simmering rage earned a Guadurian nomination for Best Actor. This duality, a tender husband one moment, unraveling tyrant the next, mirrors Francis's arc in Outside, where the character lures his family to a fortified farmhouse under the guise of safety, only for his buried traumas to erupt like the undead hordes outside. Reviewers have singled out Lucero's performance as the film's emotional fulcrum. One observer noted how he slowly descends into madness, with some zombies in between, capturing the actor's ability to layer paternal protectiveness with creeping paranoia. reminiscent of his volatile husband in The Affair, 2010, a psychological drama that explored infidelity's corrosive toll. In Outside, Lucero's Francis isn't a straightforward hero. He's a man whose lies about a broken car strand his keen in a powder keg of secrets, and Lucero sells this duplicity through micro-expressions: a furrowed brow masking guilt, a clenched jaw betraying control's illusion, a drawing from his theater roots in plays like Hang Huling Lang, 2010, where he embodied fractured masculinity on stage. What elevates Lucero's casting in Outside is Ledesma's intent to subvert zombie tropes, prioritizing interpersonal horror over gore, and Lucero's pedigree in Philippine independent cinema makes him ideal for this pivot. His work in Beirut, 2013, a found-footage chiller about urban isolation, showcased his prowess in confined spaces, much like the farmhouse siege in Outside, where every creak of floorboards amplifies familial tension. Critics have praised this authenticity. The parents played the stress moments really well, with Lucero's Francis evoking a Filipino everyman pushed to extremes, his sweat-streaked face and halting Tagalog delivery grounding the apocalypse in cultural specificity. Yet, Lucero's history isn't unblemished. Early commercial gigs in teleseries like Sana Malit Mulai, 2007, drew flack for formulaic romance, but he's since reclaimed agency through selective roles, such as the haunted veteran in Virgin Forest, 2022, a period horror that parallels Outside's blend of supernatural dread and personal hauntings. At 43 during filming, Lucero brings a weathered gravitas to fatherhood's burdens, his physical transformation a lean frame taut with anxiety echoing Jack Nicholson's Descent and The Shining, a comparison echoed in fan reviews likening Francis to Johnny from The Shining. This isn't coincidence. Lucero's preparation involved immersing in survivalist documentaries, channeling real-world paternal fears into a performance that feels viscerally lived in, making Francis's unraveling not just plot-driven but achingly human. Complementing Lucero's intensity is Beauty Gonzalez as Iris, the beleaguered wife whose quiet resilience becomes the family's fraying thread. Born Christine Marie Gonzalez on May 28, 1991, in Dumaguete City, Philippines, to a Spanish-Filipino lineage, Gonzalez embodies a rebellious beauty ethos, a moniker earned from her 2008 stint on Pinoy Big Brother, Teen Edition, where her unfiltered candor catapulted her from beauty queen, Miss Teen Philippines Central Visayas 2006, to actress. Her dual heritage, Spanish elegance meets Visaya and fiery, infuses her screen presence with an exotic allure tempered by grounded relatability, a trait that shines in Outside, where Iris navigates her husband's volatility amid zombie threats. Gonzalez's career trajectory mirrors a phoenix rise. Post-reality TV, she dipped into rom-coms like My Illegal Wife, 2014, playing a comedic foil to Pak Wang, but it was horror that unlocked her depth, starting with Feng Shui 2, 2014, JD's sequel where her portrayal of a cursed homemaker earned her a PMPC Star Awards nod for Movie Actress of the Year. Gonzalez's filmography brims with genre versatility, tallying over 40 credits that pivot from soap opera vixen in KD Nanjindo, 2018 to 2020, where she commanded as a scheming matriarch, to the ethereal ghost in My Mother's Skin, 2023, Anthony Ong's folk horror fairy tale that premiered at Sundance, showcasing her ethereal vulnerability. In Outside, Iris is no damsel, she's the emotional barometer, her subtle shifts from devoted spouse to wary survivor drawing on Gonzalez's own life via motherhood since 2016 with daughter Claudia, born amid her rising family, lending authenticity to scenes of maternal ferocity, like shielding her sons from Francis's outbursts. Reviewers laud this, Sid Lucero and Beauty Gonzalez. They're good, very convincing, with Gonzalez's Iris providing the counterweight to Lucero's chaos. Their on-screen chemistry crackling in bilingual exchanges that blend Tagalog intimacy with English universality. This pairing isn't arbitrary, both actors share indie horror roots. Lucero in Bugso, 2021, Gonzalez in Campon, 2023, directed by Richard Sums, where she played a possessed mother, a role that prepped her for Iris's internal possession by doubt and fear. At 33 during Outside's production, Gonzalez brings a youthful vigor to Iris's midlife crisis, her expressive eyes wide with terror, narrowed in accusation recalling her breakout in Starting Over Again, 2014, a rom-drama opposite Paolo Pascual, but here weaponized for horror. Ledesma's script demands Iris confront not just zombies but the long-buried secrets of her marriage, and Gonzalez delivers with restraint, her whispers and quiet farmhouse interludes evoking the suppressed rage of her character in The Two of Us, 2009, an early TV role that marked her shift from pageants to pathos. Filipino critics note how Gonzalez humanizes the genre's archetypal wife, infusing cultural nuances like bayanihan, communal spirit, eroded by isolation, making her performance a bridge between Outside's global Netflix appeal and local resonance. Her preparation included workshops on trauma response, drawing from real Philippine disaster survivor testimonies, which imbues Iris's breakdowns with raw, unpolished truth. The tears not performative but guttural, a far cry from her glossy teleserie days in The Better Half, 2017. Where she balanced villainy with vulnerability. The family's younger pillars, sons Lucas and Josh, are brought to life by Aiden Tyler Padu and Marco Masa, respectively, injecting youthful innocence into the film's grim tableau and highlighting Ledesma's savvy in blending veteran gravitas with fresh faces. Aiden Tyler Padu, as the elder Lucas, represents the threshold of adolescence thrust into apocalypse, his wide-eyed bewilderment clashing with emerging defiance. Born in 2010 in the Philippines, Padu is a child actor on the cusp of teen stardom, with a sparse but promising filmography that includes voice work in animated features and bit parts in GMA network dramas like Volts v. Legacy, 2023, where he lent energy to ensemble casts. At just 14 during filming, Padu's Lucas embodies the film's generational rift to questioning his father's edicts while scavenging for supplies, drawing from Padu's own experiences in child-led theater productions, where he learned to navigate adult-dominated narratives with quiet rebellion. Padu's performance, though critiqued as earnest but unpolished, the kids try their best but don't quite sell it, nonetheless adds poignant layers. His Lucas a mirror to Francis's youth, unscarred yet, forcing viewers to confront inherited traumas. This casting choice underscores Outside's theme of cyclical horror. Padu's fresh-faced delivery, intense bridge encounters with the undead recalls his minor role in Unbreak My Heart, 2023, a family drama that honed his emotional range amid chaos. Ledesma, known for documentaries like Mrs. Piggy, 2019, emphasizing real child perspectives, likely selected Padu for his unforced naturalism, avoiding over-rehearsed precocity that plagues many child actors in horror. In scenes of fraternal bonding, Lucas teaching Josh generator mechanics, Padu's subtle protectiveness foreshadows his potential, echoing young talents in Filipino cinema like Joshua Garcia's early turns, but with a horror edge sharpened by Outside's possessed zombie twist, where the boy's fear isn't rote but textured with sibling rivalry turned survival pact. Marco Masa, portraying the younger Josh, brings a cherubic vulnerability that amplifies the stakes, his character's wide-eyed trust in his parents shattering amid the farmhouse revelations. Born Marco Antonio Morales de Masa on August 1, 2007, in the Philippines, Masa exploded onto the scene as a child prodigy, clinching the lead in GMA's Nathaniel, 2015, at age 8. A biblical fantasy where his portrayal of a miracle-working orphan garnered PMPC Best Child Performer honors and cemented his as a teleserie wonderkind. Signed to Star Magic in 2013, Masa's film debut came in Beauty and the Bestie, 2015, a comedy where he sparred with Viscanda, showcasing comedic timing before delving into drama with Tat Long Bibe, 2017. A coming-of-age tale that highlighted his pathos. By Outside, at 17, Masa had matured into roles demanding nuance, like the street-smart kid in Black Rider, 2023, a vigilante series that tested his action chops amid moral ambiguity. Masa's Josh is the emotional core for many viewers. You feel for the whole family's pain. From the father, wife to Sansa, his performance a blend of precocious insight and childlike fragility, as when he clings to Iris during undead sieges, his tremulous voice cracking on lines about the dead ones. This draws from Masa's early training in Ang Huling Hanya, 2013, where he navigated fantasy with grounded emotion. But Outside marks his horror baptism, with Ledesma praising Masa's improvisation in psychological sequences, like Josh uncovering family photos that unearth secrets. Critics note the kid's efforts elevate the film beyond boilerplate. The acting was excellent from all involved, though Masa's youth sometimes yields to directorial guidance. His tears authentic from on-set method acting inspired by sibling dynamics in his own life. Casting Masa alongside Padu creates a believable fraternal duo, their banter Lucas ribbing Josh over scavenged comics infusing levity before horror encroaches, a dynamic honed in Masa's Firefly, 2023, ensemble work, where he balanced whimsy with weight. Supporting the core family are actors who enrich Outside's world building, starting with James Blanco as Diego, an enigmatic survivor whose alliance tests the clan's trust. Blanco, a 30-something Manila native with roots in theater, brings wiry intensity to peripheral roles. His filmography includes Untrue, 2019, a marital thriller opposite B. Alonzo, where he played a shadowy lover, earning praise for understated menace. As Diego, Blanco's guarded camaraderie with Francisa sharing generator fuel amid whispers of pre-apocalypse Cinza adds layers of external threat, his lean frame and scarred visage evoking a post-apocalyptic rogue, drawn from Blanco's real-life advocacy for mental health, mirroring the film's trauma themes. Ledesma's choice of Blanco, a frequent collaborator in shorts like Silipsa Apoy, 2020, ensures seamless integration, with reviews appreciating how Diego's arc strains relationships. Blanco's subtle betrayal cues heightening paranoia without overshadowing the leads. In Chong Di's turn as Corcura, a fleeting ally with ulterior motives, injects kinetic energy into the wasteland sequences. Born Ernest Hobaina on November 5, 1988, Di is a triple-threat actor, dancer, host whose star magic tenure since 2007 includes swim idol fame from K-Tours, 2009, and romantic leads in Wang Fam, 2015, but it's horror where he thrives, as in The Escort Wife, 2023, blending charm with creepiness. In Outside, Corcura's bridge encounter with the familia offering aid laced with suspicion showcases Di's physicality, his fluid movements contrasting the zombie's jerky possession, a nod to his dance background in ABS-CBN specials. At 36, Di's casting diversifies the ensemble, his mestizo features and bilingualese appealing to Netflix's global audience, while locally, he embodies the opportunistic survivor archetype, his performance lauded in Filipino reviews for adding a twist that not any zombie film I have seen had. Veteran Joel Torre rounds out key supports as an unnamed elder figure haunting the farmhouse periphery, his grizzled wisdom a counter to Francis's folly. Born Joel Torre on December 31, 1963, in Marikina City, Torre is Philippine cinema's elder statesman, with over 200 credits spanning The Great Raid, 2005, opposite Benjamin Bradtulav Diaz's Nort, The End of History, 2013. Where his portrayal of a wrongfully accused man snagged international festival nods. Torre's Outside role, though brief, looms large, delivering cryptic warnings about ancestral curses, leveraging his baritone gravitas from Anak, 2000, a family saga that parallels the film's themes. At 61, Torre's presence grounds the supernatural in folklore, his eyes convey unspoken histories, a technique refined in Morosa, 2016. Brilliant Mendoza's drug war drama. Casting Torre, a Guadurian staple, signals Ledesma's respect for lineage, with his scenes amplifying psychological horror. Long-buried secrets strain their relationships, Torre's spectral aura making the farmhouse as menacing as the gates. Bing Pimentel, Lucero's real-life mother, appears in a cameo as a flashback maternal figure, her casting a meta-layer blurring art and autobiography. Pimentel, born in the 1950s, was a 1970s starlet in films like Bombnarianda, 1978, transitioning to production and occasional acting, her warm demeanor contrasting Outside's chill. This familial tie enriches Francis's trauma, Pimentel's soft-spoken regrets and visions echoing Lucero's own reflections on industry pressures in interviews, adding unintended depth to the role's Oedipal undercurrents. The Undead Ensemble, uncredited but pivotal, features practical effects artists doubling as possessed zombies able to talk and mimic humanity, casting unknowns like background performers from Manila's theater scene, whose zero normalcy subverts genre norms. Ledesma scouted via open calls, prioritizing actors with improv skills for dialogues like taunting please, creating a horror that's psychologically invasive, not just visceral. Reviews highlight this: the zombies in this are more creepy than in most other films, crediting the casting's innovation in blending extras with method eeriness. Ledesma's overall casting philosophy for Outside favors authenticity over star power, drawing from the Philippine New Wave's as a think brilliant Mendoza's street casts while courting Netflix's Polish, Lucero and Gonzalez, both indie darlings with mainstream crossover, form a nucleus that withstands the film's 141-minute runtime. Their chemistry forged in prior collabs like Surrogate, 2023, teases, the children's selection Sapadu and Masa ensure generational verisimilitude, their unscarred optimism clashing with Tor's world weariness. While D and Blanco provide kinetic foils, this ensemble doesn't just populate the apocalypse, it dissects it, each performance a shard reflecting Filipino resilience amid collapse. In a landscape dominated by Hollywood zombies, Outside's cast reclaims the genre, their Tagalog-inflected anguish a defiant howl against erasure. Delving deeper into Lucero's evolution, consider how Outside caps a horror trilogy of sorts in his oeuvre, from Nervous Translation, 2018, Peak Gilligan's Ghost Story where he played a translator unraveling secrets, to Nightbird, 2023, a vampire tale of eternal isolation, culminating in Francis's paternal purgatory. Each role amplifies his specialty, a men haunted by unspoken burdens with Outside demanding physical tolls like prolonged night shoots in Pampanga Farms, where Lucero shed 15 pounds to embody starvation's edge, his ribs casting shadows and lantern light that symbolize familial hollowing. This commitment echoes his Manila Death Squad, 2022, prep, involving vigilante ride-alongs, but here channeled into domestic violence scenes that skirt abuse without exploitation, earning kudos for sensitivity. Emotional and psychological horror ensues, with Lucero's restraint preventing melodrama. Gonzalez, meanwhile, leverages her rebellious persona to subvert Iris's submissiveness. Early in her career, post-Pinoy Big Brother, she rebelled against typecasting in Bromance, My Brother's Romance, 2013. Injecting edge into rom-com fluff, a defiance that informs Iris's late film agency confronting Francis with a knife, not in rage but sorrow. Her horror pivot post-motherhood adds stakes in Moro, 2023, she played a rebel widow, but Outside personalizes it, Gonzalez drawing from postpartum isolation to fuel Iris's cabin fever monologues, her voice breaking on lines about lost normalcy. This vulnerability, honed in Pakul, 2025, a supernatural thriller, makes her the film's moral compass, reviewers noting how she takes this boilerplate film to its conclusion through sheer conviction. For The Boys, Padu's Lucas arc from naive scavenger to hardened sentinel mirrors his off-screen growth, transitioning from child extras in Sunshine Family, 2021, to leads, with Outside as a right his ad-libs and zombie chases, like improvised curses, add teen authenticity, tempering critiques of inexperience with raw potential. Masa's Josh, conversely, channels his Juves, 2020, innocence, but with terrors padding out his screams and possession scenes, doubled for effect, evoke Maria, Leonora, Teresa, 2019, where he navigated grief young. Together, they embody the film's thesis, youth as both salvation and casualty. They're casting a bet on future stars that pays off in heartfelt pain. Blanco's Diego extends this, his outsider status a lens for societal breakdown from the day we sold our souls to the devil. 2022, indie, he brings nomad grit, his sparse dialogue laden with subtext recalling Tor's influence, under whom he studied in workshops. D's Corcura, with dance-honed agility, injects pulse to action beats. His betrayal reveal a masterclass in micro-tension, building on Pinoy Big Brother charisma but darkened for Apocalypse. Tor's cameo, though, is casting poetry. His farmhouse ghost whispers echoing the kingdom. 2025, another Lucero project, linking generational sins. Pimentel's meta-mom role closes the circle, her presence a whisper of Eigenmann legacy, making Outside not just a zombie tale but a family chronicle and horror drag. In ensemble terms, Outside's cast coheres through shared cultural fluency. Tagalog's rhythms in arguments, Visayan inflections, and Gonzalez's plesa elevating a script that deviates from survival horror to psychological. Per fans, Ledesma's vision, informed by his docu background, prioritizes lived textures. Lucero's calloused hands from farm labor, Gonzalez's call to prayer amid siege. The boys' schoolboy pranks turned desperate. This isn't star-driven fluff, it's a chorus where each voice, from leads to lurkers, harmonizes dread, proving Filipino casting's potency in global genre fare. Expanding on Lucero's dynasty impact, growing up amid sets like his father's Moro Me, 1999, Dives taught him performance as survival, a lesson Francis internalized as a hoarding gas like oxygen. His Celestina, burlesque dancer, 2024, role as a sleazy impresario prepped the manipulative edge, but Outside strips it to paternal core. His breakdown scene a rain-lashed confetti rivaling triggered 2020's rage, but tenderized by love's ruin. Gonzalez's Spanish roots add exoticism to Iris's resilience, her The Time That Remains, 2025, prep overlapping with Outside, blending temporal hauntings. Her gore and violence tolerance, warned in reviews, stems from Campan's exorcisms, making Iris's bloodied defenses visceral yet empathetic. Padu and Masa's duo, cast after chemistry reads, evokes Volt's V Brotherhood, their fear layered with Playa Josh's toy zombie prop, a heartbreaking motif. Blanco and D's interlopers, scouted for physical contrast, hidden isolation. Tor's sage a folklore anchor, Pimentel's echo a soul stir. Thus, Outside's casting weaves a web where every thread pulls the family's doom tighter, a testament to Philippine talent's depth in reimagining horror's heart. Outside, 2024, an in-depth examination production. The production of Outside represents a significant milestone in Philippine cinema, marking Netflix Philippines' first original zombie film. This ambitious project brought together some of the country's most talented actors and filmmakers to create a unique entry in the post-apocalyptic horror genre. The film's production was characterized by its commitment to authenticity, its exploration of deeply personal themes, and its determination to showcase the Philippine setting as an integral part of the narrative rather than merely a backdrop. The production company behind Outside, Black Cap Pictures, worked closely with Netflix to ensure that the film would resonate with both local and international audiences. The collaboration aimed to create a zombie film that felt distinctively Filipino while still appealing to global viewers familiar with the genre. This balance between local specificity and universal themes became a defining characteristic of the production process, influencing decisions ranging from casting to location selection to the visual style of the film. The production team faced the challenge of creating a 142-minute feature film that would maintain tension and emotional engagement throughout its extended runtime. Unlike many contemporary horror films that opt for shorter, more intense experiences, Outside was designed as an epic exploration of family trauma set against the backdrop of societal collapse. This ambitious scope required careful planning and resource allocation to ensure that every scene contributed meaningfully to the overall narrative while maintaining the film's horror elements. One of the most distinctive aspects of the production was the decision to make the zombies capable of speech. This creative choice, driven by director Carlo Ledesma's vision, required additional considerations in terms of casting, makeup, and performance direction. The speaking zombies were intentionally designed to be more than mindless monsters, adding layers of tragedy and horror to their appearances. This approach necessitated finding performers who could convey both the horror of their transformed state and remnants of their former humanity, making the casting process for even minor zombie roles more complex than typical zombie productions. The production also prioritized the use of practical effects and makeup over extensive digital effects. The decision to employ local residents from Negros Occidental as zombie performers created a sense of community involvement in the film while also contributing to the authentic, grounded feel that Ledesma sought. These performers underwent extensive makeup sessions to achieve the deteriorating, infected look that the film required, with makeup artists working to create variations in zombie appearance that would reflect different stages of infection and decomposition. Development and pre-production. The development of Outside began with director Carlo Ledesma's vision to create a film that would use the zombie apocalypse genre as a vehicle for exploring deeper themes of family dysfunction and generational trauma. Ledesma drew inspiration from family dramas and post-apocalyptic films such as The Day After and the Mad Max franchise, seeking to blend the intimate character study of domestic drama with the visceral thrills of survival horror. This fusion of genres required extensive development work to ensure that neither element would overwhelm the other and that the film would feel cohesive despite its ambitious scope. During the pre-production phase, significant attention was given to developing the script's dual narrative threads, the external threat of the zombie outbreak and the internal destruction caused by family trauma. The screenplay needed to balance these elements carefully, using the zombie threat to externalize and amplify the psychological horror already present within the family unit. This thematic approach influenced every aspect of pre-production, from location scouting to casting to the development of the film's visual language. The casting process was a critical component of pre-production, with Sid Lucero and Beauty Gonzalez confirmed as the lead actors in a press statement released on October 11, 2023. The selection of these two performers was particularly significant, as both had established reputations for bringing depth and nuance to challenging roles. Lucero's ability to portray internal conflict and psychological complexity made him ideal for the role of Francis, a man whose childhood trauma resurfaces and ultimately consumes him during the apocalypse. Gonzalez, known for her emotional range and strength in portraying complex female characters, was perfectly suited to play Iris, a woman caught between her past mistakes and her desire to protect her children. The pre-production team also worked extensively on developing the film's thematic framework around mental health. While the film overtly tackles a zombie apocalypse, the production team intended to incorporate mental health issues as a central theme from the earliest stages of development. This focus on psychological trauma, particularly generational trauma, required careful research and consultation to ensure authentic and sensitive portrayal. The filmmakers recognized that they were using the horror genre to explore serious issues related to abuse, family dysfunction, and the ways trauma perpetuates itself across generations. Location scouting during pre-production led the team to La Carlota and Cabancalan in Negros Occidental, which happened to be the home province of director Ledesma, as well as stars Gonzalez and Lucero. This connection to the location was not coincidental but rather a deliberate choice to ground the film in a setting that the key creative personnel understood intimately. The familiarity with the region allowed for more authentic and detailed portrayal of the environment, from the architecture of the ancestral mansion to the layout of the sugarcane plantations that feature prominently in the film. The pre-production phase also involved extensive planning for the film's zombie sequences. Unlike productions that rely heavily on computer-generated imagery, the team decided to use practical makeup effects and local performers to create the zombie hordes. This decision required coordination with the local communities in Negros Occidental, recruiting residents who would be willing to undergo the lengthy makeup process and perform as the infected. This approach not only kept production costs manageable but also created a sense of community investment in the film's success. Design work during pre-production focused on creating a visual style that would distinguish Outside from other zombie films. The production design team worked to develop the look of Francis's childhood home, an ancestral mansion that would serve as the primary setting for most of the film. The house needed to feel simultaneously like a refuge and a prison, a place that offered protection from the external threat while harboring its own dangers in the form of Francis's traumatic memories. The mansion's design incorporated traditional Filipino architectural elements while also creating spaces that would work effectively for the film's various set pieces. From intimate family confrontations to violent zombie attacks, the pre-production period also involved detailed planning for the film's pacing and structure. At 142 minutes, Outside would be longer than most horror films, requiring careful consideration of how to maintain tension across its extended runtime. The creative team developed a narrative structure that would allow for both quiet, character-focused moments and intense action sequences, creating a rhythm that would keep audiences engaged while allowing the themes to develop fully. This planning included storyboarding key sequences, planning camera movements, and determining how the escalating tension within the family would parallel the external zombie threat. Weather considerations were factored into the pre-production planning, with the team preparing for the possibility of delays or complications due to the tropical climate of Negros Occidental. These preparations would prove prescient, as weather conditions would indeed hamper filming. During production, the pre-production team developed contingency plans and flexible shooting schedules to accommodate potential weather-related disruptions while ensuring that they could still capture the visual aesthetics they desired. Filming principal photography for Outside took place primarily in La Carlota and Cabancalan in Negros Occidental, locations that provided both the atmospheric setting and the practical infrastructure needed for the production. The choice of these locations proved essential to the film's authentic feel, as the region's sugarcane plantations and traditional Filipino mansions provided a distinct visual identity that set Outside apart from zombie films set in more generic urban or suburban environments. The filming process lasted approximately 1 month, a relatively compressed schedule for a film of this scope and length. This tight timeline required efficient planning and execution, with the crew working long days to capture all the necessary footage. The compressed schedule also meant that the cast and crew needed to maintain high energy and focus throughout the production, as there was limited room for error or extensive reshooting. Director Carlo Ledesma worked closely with his cinematographer to pre-visualize many of the film's key sequences, ensuring that shooting days proceeded as smoothly as possible. One of the primary filming locations was a Filipino-style mansion that served as the ancestral home where the Abel family takes refuge. This location became the heart of the film, appearing in the majority of scenes and serving as both sanctuary and prison for the characters. The mansion's architecture and interior spaces were utilized extensively, with Ledesma and his team exploring how the building itself could become a character in the story. The house's various rooms, from the ominous basement where Francis was abused as a child to the upper floors where the family attempts to maintain normalcy, were captured in detail to create a complete sense of place. The sugarcane farms surrounding the mansion provided another crucial filming location, offering expansive outdoor spaces that contrasted with the claustrophobic interior scenes. The tall sugarcane provided both visual interest and practical utility, creating maze-like environments where characters could hide from zombies or where the infected could emerge unexpectedly. The farm sequences required careful coordination with local landowners and timing to ensure that the sugarcane was at the right height and condition for filming. These outdoor sequences also required managing larger numbers of extras and coordinating complex action choreography in challenging terrain. Weather conditions presented significant challenges during the filming process. The tropical climate of Negros Occidental brought intense heat, high humidity, and unpredictable rain showers that could disrupt shooting schedules. The production team had to remain flexible, adjusting daily plans based on weather conditions and sometimes shooting scenes out of sequence to take advantage of favorable conditions. The heat proved particularly challenging for the zombie performers, who spent hours in heavy makeup and prosthetics. The production team had to carefully manage shooting schedules to ensure that performers, especially those in full zombie makeup, had adequate breaks and protection from the elements. The casting of local residents from Negros Occidental as zombies created unique dynamics during filming. These performers brought enthusiasm and commitment to their roles, despite the physical demands of wearing elaborate makeup and performing in hot, humid conditions. The decision to cast locals also created a sense of community involvement in the production, with families and friends of the performers visiting the set and the film becoming a topic of local interest and pride. This community connection contributed to the authentic atmosphere captured on film, as the performers and crew felt personally invested in representing their region positively. Filming the zombie sequences required extensive coordination between the makeup department, the stunt team, and the director. Each zombie performer needed several hours in the makeup chair to achieve the desired look of infection and decay. The makeup team created various stages of zombie transformation, from recently infected individuals who still retained much of their human appearance to those who had been infected longer and showed more advanced decomposition. This attention to detail in the zombie makeup helped create a more realistic and disturbing portrayal of the outbreak's progression. The film's action sequences presented particular challenges during filming. The scene where Joshua's gunfire attracts a horde of zombies required coordinating large numbers of zombie performers, managing the logistics of the firearms used on set, and capturing the chaos and terror of the situation while maintaining coherent cinematography. Safety protocols were essential during these sequences, especially given the use of firearms, even though they were props or firing blanks. The stunt coordinator worked closely with the director and actors to ensure that all action sequences were executed safely while still appearing dangerous and visceral on screen. The intimate family scenes required a different approach, with Ledesma working closely with the actors to capture authentic emotional moments. The confined spaces of the mansion's interior allowed for intense close-ups and carefully composed shots that emphasized the characters' psychological states. Scenes in the basement, where Francis confronts his traumatic memories, were particularly challenging to film, requiring Sid Lucero to access deep emotional reserves while working in a physically uncomfortable environment. These scenes often required multiple takes to capture the right balance of vulnerability and menace in Francis's character. The filming of the climactic sequences, where the family's dysfunction reaches its breaking point and violence erupts within the household, required careful choreography and emotional preparation from the cast. Beauty Gonzalez's scenes where Iris must fight against her husband to protect her children demanded both physical and emotional intensity. The production team worked to create a safe environment where the actors could fully commit to these difficult scenes while maintaining their well-being. This included having intimacy coordinators and ensuring open communication between the director and actors about the demands of each scene. Night shoots presented additional technical challenges, requiring extensive lighting setups to create the appropriate atmosphere while still maintaining visibility for the camera. The film's nighttime sequences, including the arrival of the wounded soldier Corcura and the final confrontations, needed to balance darkness and shadow with the practical necessity of allowing audiences to see what was happening on screen. The cinematography team used a combination of practical light sources within the scenes, such as flashlights and lanterns, and carefully positioned film lights to create a naturalistic look that enhanced the tension and danger of these nighttime moments. The scene where Francis stages a fake zombie attack to justify barricading the family inside required careful planning and execution. This sequence needed to be convincing enough that the family would believe the threat while also leaving subtle clues for attentive viewers that Francis was orchestrating events. The filming of this scene required precise timing and coordination between Lucero and the other actors to sell the deception while building the paranoia and claustrophobia that would dominate the film's final act. Post-production. The post-production phase of Outside was crucial in shaping the raw footage into the cohesive, emotionally powerful film that would eventually reach audiences. With 142 minutes of final runtime, the editing process required careful attention to pacing, narrative flow, and the balance between the film's horror elements and its character-driven drama. The extended length of the film meant that every scene needed to justify its inclusion, contributing either to character development, plot progression, or thematic exploration. The editing team faced the challenge of weaving together multiple narrative threads: the immediate survival horror of the zombie outbreak, the slowly unraveling family dynamics, Francis's psychological deterioration, and the revelation of past traumas. These elements needed to be balanced carefully so that none overwhelmed the others and so that the film maintained momentum across its extended runtime. The editor worked closely with director Carlo Ledesma to find the right rhythm, alternating between intense action sequences and quieter character moments to create a dynamic viewing experience that would keep audiences engaged. Color grading played a significant role in establishing the film's visual tone and atmosphere. The post-production team developed a color palette that would reflect the film's themes of decay and deterioration, both physical and psychological. The exterior scenes, particularly those set in the sugarcane fields, were treated to emphasize the harsh tropical sunlight and the oppressive heat, creating a sense of an unforgiving environment. Interior scenes were given a different treatment, with the mansion's spaces often appearing dim and shadowy, emphasizing the gothic horror elements of the family's confinement. The color grading also helped differentiate between the different time periods shown in the film, with Francis's flashbacks to his childhood abuse given a distinct visual treatment that made them immediately recognizable as memories rather than present action. Sound design was another critical element of post-production, particularly given the film's focus on creating atmosphere and building tension. The sound team worked to create an audio landscape that would enhance both the horror elements and the psychological drama. The zombies' vocalizations required special attention, as the decision to make them capable of speech meant that their sounds needed to be disturbing while still remaining intelligible. The sound designers worked with the actors who had played zombies during filming, sometimes recording additional dialogue or sound effects to layer into the scenes. The result was a distinctive zombie sound that felt fresh within the genre while still maintaining the unsettling quality necessary for horror. The musical score underwent development during post-production, with the composer working to create themes that would support both the external horror of the zombie outbreak and the internal horror of family trauma. The music needed to be flexible enough to work across the film's various tones, from action-oriented sequences to intimate character moments to the building paranoia of Francis's mental breakdown. The score incorporated elements that would feel appropriate to the Filipino setting while also drawing on the musical traditions of horror cinema to create something that would resonate with international audiences familiar with the genre. Visual effects work in post-production focused primarily on enhancing practical effects rather than creating entirely digital elements. While the production had relied heavily on practical makeup and prosthetics during filming, certain zombie effects required digital enhancement in post-production to achieve the desired level of decay or to create particularly disturbing visual moments. The visual effects team worked to ensure that these digital enhancements blended seamlessly with the practical effects, maintaining the grounded, realistic aesthetic that the filmmakers had cultivated during production. Effects work also included removing modern elements from certain shots, enhancing the post-apocalyptic atmosphere, and occasionally adding to the numbers of zombies and crowd scenes where practical limitations had prevented having as many performers as the scene required. The basement sequences, which were crucial to understanding Francis's character and the source of his trauma, received particular attention during post-production. These scenes needed to be disturbing without being gratuitous, conveying the horror of childhood abuse while remaining within the bounds of what audiences could tolerate. The editing, color grading, sound design, and music all contributed to making these sequences effective while showing respect for the serious subject matter. The team worked to ensure that these flashbacks felt integrated into the film's overall narrative rather than standing apart as separate sequences. The film's climactic moments, including the revelation of Joshua's true parentage, the killing of the soldier Corcura, and the final confrontations between family members, required careful editing to maintain emotional impact while ensuring narrative clarity. These scenes contained some of the film's most intense performances from the cast, and the post-production team worked to highlight these performances while maintaining the chaotic, desperate atmosphere of the situations. The editing needed to make clear the motivations driving each character's actions while preserving the shock and horror of what was unfolding on screen. The final act of the film, where Francis accidentally shoots Joshua and dies while acknowledging him as his son, underwent extensive refinement during post-production. This emotional climax needed to land with full impact, bringing together all the film's themes about trauma, family, and the possibility of redemption even in the darkest moments. The editing, music, and sound design all contributed to making this scene as powerful as possible, with the post-production team working to ensure that audiences would feel the full weight of the tragedy while also recognizing the note of hope in Francis's final words to his son. Throughout post-production, the team maintained focus on the film's central themes of generational trauma and mental health. Every creative decision, from editing choices to sound design to visual effects, was made with these themes in mind. The goal was to create a film that would work as an exciting horror movie while also serving as a meditation on how trauma perpetuates itself across generations and how family dysfunction can be as dangerous as any external threat. Music. The musical score for Outside played a crucial role in establishing and maintaining the film's unique tone, which blended survival horror with intimate family drama. The music needed to be versatile enough to support both the visceral terror of zombie attacks and the psychological horror of Francis's descent into paranoid violence. This dual nature of the film required a composer who could work across multiple styles and create themes that would resonate emotionally with audiences while enhancing the film's suspenseful moments. The score incorporated elements that reflected the film's Filipino setting while also drawing on the broader traditions of horror film music. This fusion created a distinctive sound that felt rooted in a specific cultural context while remaining accessible to international audiences familiar with the zombie genre. The music avoided relying too heavily on the typical orchestral bombast common in action-heavy horror films, instead opting for a more intimate, character-focused approach that emphasized the personal nature of the family's tragedy. Thematic development was a crucial aspect of the musical score, with different characters and situations receiving their own musical motifs. Francis's theme likely incorporated elements that reflected both his role as a protective father and the darker psychological forces driving him toward violence and control. Iris's musical theme would have emphasized her position as a mother trying to protect her children while dealing with her own guilt over past mistakes. The children, Joshua and Lucas, would have had musical elements that emphasized their innocence and vulnerability within the increasingly dangerous situation. The zombie threat itself required its own musical treatment, with the score creating an atmosphere of dread and danger whenever the infected appeared or threatened the family. However, given the film's approach to zombies as more than mindless monsters, the music associated with them likely contained elements of tragedy and humanity rather than pure monstrousness. This musical choice would reinforce the film's thematic concern with loss and transformation, treating the zombies as tragic figures rather than simple antagonists. The mansion setting, which functions almost as a character in the film, likely received its own musical theme or motif. The music associated with the house would need to convey both its function as a refuge from external danger and its role as a site of past trauma. As the film progresses and the house transforms from sanctuary to prison, the musical treatment of this location would likely evolve, becoming increasingly oppressive and claustrophobic to match Francis's tightening grip on his family. The basement scenes, where Francis experiences flashbacks to his childhood abuse, required particularly careful musical scoring. The music in these sequences needed to convey the horror of childhood trauma without becoming overwhelming or exploitative. The score likely employed unsettling, dissonant elements to create psychological unease while also incorporating sounds or musical ideas that would create a clear distinction between these flashback sequences and the present-day narrative. This musical differentiation helped viewers immediately recognize when Francis was experiencing traumatic memories versus dealing with present threats. Action sequences in the film, such as the zombie attacks and the climactic violence within the family, required dynamic musical accompaniment that would heighten tension and excitement while serving the emotional truth of the scenes. The music during these sequences likely built in intensity, using rhythm and orchestration to create a sense of mounting danger and chaos. However, even during the most intense action moments, the music would need to maintain connection to the film's character-focused core, ensuring that audiences remained invested in the family's fate rather than simply experiencing generic horror thrills. The quieter moments of the film, including family discussions and the building tension as Francis's paranoia grows, required a different musical approach. The score during these scenes likely emphasized atmosphere and mood over melody, creating a sense of unease and anticipation. The music would work subtly to keep audiences on edge even during apparently calm moments, reflecting the undercurrent of dysfunction and trauma that persists within the family even when they're not under immediate external threat. The film's emotional peaks, including the revelations about Joshua's parentage and Diego's death, required music that could support and amplify the actors' performances without overwhelming them. The score during these moments likely stripped away some of the complexity present in other scenes, focusing on simple, emotionally direct musical ideas that would resonate with audiences. The goal would be to enhance the emotional impact of these revelations while allowing the performances and dialogue to remain the primary focus. The ending of the film, where Francis dies after acknowledging Joshua as his son, required especially careful musical treatment. The music needed to capture the tragedy of Francis's death while also conveying the glimmer of hope in his final act of acceptance and love. The score likely built to an emotional climax during this sequence before transitioning to music that would accompany Joshua's rescue of his mother and brother, providing a sense of closure while acknowledging that the trauma of recent events would remain with the surviving family members. Throughout the film, the music served to unify the various elements of horror, drama, action, psychological thriller into a cohesive whole. The score acted as an emotional guide for audiences, helping them navigate the film's shifts in tone and providing continuity across the 142-minute runtime. The composer's work ensured that Outside felt like a complete, unified artistic vision rather than a collection of disparate genre elements. The release strategy for Outside reflected its status as Netflix Philippines' first original zombie film and the streaming platform's commitment to producing local content with global appeal. The film's journey to audiences involved careful planning around release dates, marketing strategies, and positioning within Netflix's larger slate of horror content and Filipino productions. Theatrical Outside did not receive a traditional theatrical release, which is consistent with Netflix's general distribution strategy for its original content. As a Netflix original film produced specifically for the streaming platform, the movie was designed from the outset for home viewing rather than theatrical exhibition. This approach allowed the filmmakers to create a film with a longer runtime than might typically be viable for theatrical release, as the 142-minute length would not face the same commercial pressures regarding theater turnover and showing schedules that theatrical releases must consider. The absence of a theatrical release meant that the film would not compete for box office revenue or face the traditional metrics by which theatrical films are judged successful. Instead, Outside would be evaluated based on streaming metrics such as viewing hours, completion rates, and subscriber engagement. This different release model allowed the creative team certain freedoms during production, as they did not need to consider factors like theatrical sound systems, projection formats, or the specific viewing experience of a cinema audience. However, the direct-to-streaming release also meant that audiences would not have the opportunity to experience the film on the large screen with theatrical sound, which might have enhanced certain aspects of the horror experience. The zombie sequences, the expansive shots of the sugarcane plantations, and the claustrophobic intensity of the mansion interiors all might have had different impacts when viewed in a theatrical setting. The filmmakers needed to ensure that the film would work effectively on home viewing systems, from large televisions to tablets and smartphones, which influenced certain creative decisions about shot composition, sound design, and visual effects. The film was initially set to release worldwide on Netflix on October 11, 2024, according to early announcements and promotional materials. This date was promoted through various entertainment news outlets and on Netflix's own platforms, building anticipation among horror fans and followers of Philippine cinema. However, the release date was subsequently moved to October 17, 2024. Shifting the premiere by less than a week. While the reasons for this date change were not publicly disclosed, such adjustments are not uncommon in streaming releases and can be due to various factors including marketing strategy adjustments, technical considerations, or efforts to optimize the film's positioning within Netflix's release calendar. The October release timing positioned Outside to take advantage of the approach to Halloween, when horror content typically sees increased viewership. This strategic timing helped maximize the film's potential audience, as viewers actively seek out horror movies during the autumn season. The release in mid-October also gave the film several weeks to build word of mouth and critical discussion before Halloween itself, potentially extending its relevance and viewership through the entire spooky season. As a Netflix original, the film was made available simultaneously to all Netflix subscribers worldwide who had access to the platform, representing a truly global release that would have been impossible through traditional theatrical distribution. This worldwide availability meant that Outside could potentially reach audiences far beyond the Philippines, introducing international viewers to Filipino horror cinema and potentially building a global fan base for the cast and crew. The simultaneous global release also meant that the film would face immediate international critical response and audience reaction, rather than the staggered releases that sometimes characterize international distribution of Filipino films. Home media as a Netflix original production, Outside follows the streaming platform's standard distribution model, where the film remains primarily available through Netflix's streaming service rather than receiving traditional home media releases such as DVD or Blu-ray. This distribution approach has become increasingly common for streaming originals, as platforms seek to maintain exclusive content that drives and retains subscriptions. The film's availability on Netflix means that it can be accessed by the platform's global subscriber base, which numbers in the hundreds of millions across virtually every country where Netflix operates. This vast potential audience represents opportunities for viewership that would far exceed what most Filipino films could achieve through traditional theatrical and home media distribution. The streaming model also allows for more flexibility in viewing, as subscribers can watch the film multiple times, pause and resume at their convenience, and access it across multiple devices. Netflix's technical infrastructure ensures that Outside can be viewed in various quality levels depending on subscriber tier and internet connection speed, from standard definition to high definition to 4K resolution where available. The platform's adaptive streaming technology adjusts quality in real time to provide the best possible viewing experience based on available bandwidth. This technical flexibility ensures that the film can be accessed by viewers with varying internet speeds and device capabilities, maximizing its potential audience. The film's availability on Netflix also includes accessibility features such as subtitles in multiple languages and audio dubbing options, depending on regional requirements and Netflix's localization efforts. These features help make the film accessible to a broader international audience, including deaf and hard-of-hearing viewers and those who prefer to watch content in their native language. The subtitles and dubbing also help overcome language barriers, allowing the film to reach viewers who might not speak Filipino languages fluently. Unlike traditional home media releases, which might include bonus features such as behind-the-scenes documentaries, deleted scenes, or commentary tracks, Netflix streaming releases typically do not include such supplementary materials. However, Netflix sometimes produces separate promotional content such as interviews with cast and crew, making of featurettes, or discussion videos that are made available on their platform or through their social media channels. Any such supplementary content for Outside would help build audience engagement and provide deeper insight into the film's production and themes. The streaming model also affects how the film's success is measured and reported. Rather than box office numbers or home media sales, the film's performance would be evaluated based on streaming metrics such as total viewing hours, completion rates, how many viewers watch the entire film versus abandoning it partway through, and impact on subscriber acquisition and retention. Netflix typically releases selective information about viewership for its original content, sometimes publishing rankings or announcing when films reach certain viewership milestones. The long-term availability of Outside on Netflix depends on the terms of the original production agreement between the filmmakers and the platform. Netflix originals typically remain on the platform indefinitely as part of its permanent content library, unlike licensed content which may be removed when licensing agreements expire. This permanent availability means that Outside can continue to find new audiences long after its initial release, with potential for the film to experience renewed interest during future Halloween seasons or when cast and crew members are involved in new projects that draw attention back to their earlier work. The streaming distribution model also affects how the film can be discussed and analyzed in critical and academic contexts. The lack of physical media means that researchers and critics must rely on screen captures and streaming access for detailed analysis, rather than being able to own permanent copies of the film. However, the widespread availability through Netflix does make it easier for the film to be accessed by international scholars and critics interested in Philippine cinema or the zombie genre. The reception of Outside encompassed both critical response and audience reaction, with the film generating discussion within Filipino cinema circles, the horror community, and among Netflix's global subscriber base. As Netflix Philippines' first original zombie film, Outside carried expectations regarding both its quality as a horror film and its representation of Filipino storytelling and filmmaking. Box office. As a Netflix original film released exclusively on the streaming platform, Outside did not have a traditional theatrical run and therefore did not generate box office revenue in the conventional sense. The film's financial success would instead be measured through streaming metrics and its contribution to Netflix's subscriber retention and acquisition efforts. This distribution model represents the evolving nature of film economics, where streaming platforms have created an alternative to the traditional theatrical release and box office performance that has historically defined commercial success in cinema. The absence of box office numbers means that the film's commercial performance cannot be evaluated using traditional metrics such as opening weekend grosses, total box office revenue, or cost-to-revenue ratios. Instead, Netflix evaluates the success of its original films based on proprietary metrics including total viewing hours, completion rates, cost per viewing hour, and the film's impact on subscriber behavior. These metrics remain largely private, with Netflix selectively releasing information about viewership when it serves their promotional interests. While specific viewership data for Outside has not been publicly disclosed by Netflix in detail, the platform occasionally releases rankings or announces when films achieve certain viewership milestones. The film's performance would be evaluated not just on raw viewership numbers but on factors such as how many subscribers watched the film within the first few weeks of release, how many viewers completed the entire 142-minute runtime, and whether the film generated significant social media discussion and engagement. The economic model for Outside differs significantly from traditional Filipino films, which typically rely on theatrical box office performance for their primary revenue. By producing the film as an original, Netflix assumed the production costs and risks, providing guaranteed funding that might not have been available through traditional Filipino film financing models. This arrangement allowed the filmmakers to create a more ambitious production than might have been possible with conventional Filipino film budgets, while also ensuring the film would reach a global audience through Netflix's platform. The film's value to Netflix extends beyond immediate viewership numbers. As part of the platform's strategy to produce local content in various markets around the world, Outside contributes to Netflix's appeal to Filipino subscribers and its reputation as a platform that supports diverse, locally produced content. The film's presence in Netflix's library adds value to subscriptions in the Philippines and among Filipino diaspora communities worldwide, potentially influencing subscription decisions and retention. The success of Outside may also influence Netflix's future investments in Filipino film production. Strong performance could lead to increased funding for Filipino filmmakers and more opportunities for local content creators to work with the platform. Conversely, if the film underperformed according to Netflix's internal metrics, it might affect the platform's approach to similar projects in the future. However, given Netflix's ongoing commitment to local content production across its global markets, a single film's performance would likely be evaluated within the broader context of the platform's regional content strategy. Critical response. The critical reception of Outside was generally positive, with the film receiving praise for its performances, thematic depth, and unique approach to the zombie genre while also facing some criticism regarding pacing and dialogue. On the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, The film achieved an 80% positive rating based on 10 critics' reviews, with an average rating of 7.40 out of 10. This score indicates that a majority of critics found the film to be a worthwhile viewing experience, even if not all considered it an unqualified masterpiece. Another review aggregator, Criticultura, gave the film a score of 71 out of 100 based on 22 reviews, indicating a generally positive reception among critics. This broader sampling of critical opinion reinforced the sense that Outside was successful in its ambitions while leaving room for debate about specific elements of its execution. The consistency between these two aggregator scores suggests a fairly unified critical consensus that the film achieved what it set out to do, even if individual critics had varying opinions about specific aspects. Film critic Fred Hawson gave Outside a 7 out of 10 rating, praising the film's cinematography and the performances of Sid Lucero and Beauty Gonzalez. Hawson's review highlighted these elements as particular strengths, noting how the visual composition captured both the beauty and danger of the Philippine landscape and how the lead actors brought emotional depth and nuance to their roles. However, Hawson also criticized portions of the dialogue for being dragging, suggesting that some scenes could have been tightened or that certain conversations extended longer than necessary. This mixed assessment was representative of many critical responses, which found much to admire in the film while also identifying areas where the execution could have been stronger. The performances of Sid Lucero and Beauty Gonzalez emerged as a consistent point of praise across multiple reviews. Critics highlighted Lucero's ability to portray Francis's psychological deterioration, making the character simultaneously sympathetic and frightening as his trauma and paranoia consume him. His performance captured the complexity of a man trying to protect his family while being destroyed by his inability to process his own traumatic past. Gonzalez received similar acclaim for her portrayal of Iris, with critics noting her ability to convey the character's guilt, determination, and maternal love even as her marriage crumbles and the world falls apart around her. The film's approach to the zombie genre was noted by several critics as one of its distinguishing features. Rather than focusing primarily on action and gore, Outside used the zombie outbreak as a backdrop for exploring family dysfunction and psychological trauma. Critics appreciated this thematic depth, noting that the film had more on its mind than typical zombie fare. The decision to make zombies capable of speech was specifically mentioned in some reviews as an interesting creative choice that added layers to the film's horror, making the infected more tragic and disturbing than traditional mindless zombie hordes. The cinematography received consistent praise from critics who noted how the film captured the Philippine landscape and used the mansion setting effectively. The visual composition helped establish mood and atmosphere, with the lush but dangerous exterior environments contrasting with the increasingly claustrophobic interior scenes. The cinematography was noted as being particularly effective in building tension and using visual language to review one. Outside In is a love story featuring a great variety of loves. It's the story of an ex-con, J. Duplass, who returns to his small Washington hometown after 20 years in prison, bringing back his personal effects and a huge torch for his high school teacher Carol, Edie Falco, who advocated for and was eventually instrumental in getting his early release. The central relationship of Lynn Shelton's film is many things at once: maternal, platonic, and at times, very much not platonic. But through it, the nature of what it means to care for someone else, romantically or otherwise, is thrown into relief in multiple relationships, even if that means some people don't get what they want. The long phone conversations and prison visits have already taken place before the film starts. Falco and Duplass awkwardly and effectively convey the bond of two people who have been through something life-altering enough to override their own differences in age, experience, and point of view. Carol is some 20-plus years Chris's senior, but the age difference is in fact even greater psychologically. Chris was barely out of his teens when he was convicted for his role in the murder of a convenience store clerk. Duplass spends his days riding his BMX through the rain-soaked streets in floppy cargo pants and a hoodie, an overgrown teen with an overgrown teen's romantic sensibility. Carol, meanwhile, is stuck in a loveless 25-year marriage and is alienated from her moody teenage daughter Hildy, Caitlin Deaver. She's already dreaming of a second life, while Chris never really started his first. While Chris pines for Carol and Carol tries to find a way to sustain their relationship appropriately, Chris begins the arduous process of re-entry into society, and tries to figure out how to text, while coming to terms with his long-repressed resentment of his brother, Ted. Ben Schwartz, Hildy, seeing their fellow troubled teen in him, forms a bond with Chris, and through that friendship, Hildy and Carol creep toward an understanding. More relationships are fixed in Shelton's film than ruined, and she proves there's plenty of drama in that process. The Tourism Board of Washington State isn't going to be sending Shelton any thank you cards anytime soon, but her depiction of Granite Falls as a kind of perpetually soggy settlement constantly on the verge of being overtaken by brilliant, emerald-colored moss, is nothing if not evocative. Nathan Miller's cinematography is lo-fi and intimate for the most part, with interludes of crisp visual poetry in between the dialogue. This is a conversation and character-driven film with an occasional eye for something more ineffable, but Falco and Duplass's complicated, nakedly searching performances are the main event. Review 2. A family trying to outrun the zombie outbreak by returning to the father's childhood farmhouse, fortifying it to keep out the dead ones. Alas, there is just as much horror and trauma at the ancestral home as there is outside the gates. There may be spoilers in the rest of the review story. Outside starts when Francis, Lucero, Iris, Gonzalez, Josh, Masa, and Lucas, Padu, try to hide from a zombie apocalypse. They go to Francis' childhood farm and create a fortified home. However, Francis and Iris have seen their relationship tested, which has caused a long-term strain on their time together. They want different things from the end of the world. After their first attempt to relocate saw them face a group of zombies, they decided to resettle. However, they were alone, and the threats were outside their walls, waiting to come in. Outside is a horror thriller following a family trying to hold everything together during a zombie apocalypse. It sees them fortify a home, before getting caught up in past dramas and conflict about where the best place to live will be. This movie brings us a different concept of the zombie outbreak movie. Instead of the zombie being the biggest threat, it is the mind of the survivors. It plays into the psychological damage created in an isolated environment, through the eyes of a family slowly torn apart. The one downside of this movie is the length. It could have told the same story with a much tighter runtime. However, it is interesting to see the horrors of a zombie outbreak putting more focus on human problems. Review 3. Outside might have a long runtime, but the immersive plot and great storytelling make you forget that it's over 2 hours. Contains mild spoilers for Outside. LA. Carlota, Philippines. I recently watched Outside, the latest zombie horror drama from the Philippines that premiered on Netflix on Thursday, October 17, 2024, directed by Carlo Ledesma. This film caught my attention not just because of its zombie storyline but also because of how it managed to mix psychological drama with ongoing family conflicts. Clocking in at 2 hours and 22 minutes, I was initially concerned about the length, but once I got into the story, it didn't feel like it dragged on too much. Set in the middle of a zombie outbreak, Outside focuses on a family trying to outrun danger by seeking refuge in the father's childhood home. There's plenty of English spoken in the film, so it's easy to follow even without the dubbing. What surprised me the most was how much the movie balances horror with an emotional core, drawing me into the characters' personal struggles as much as their fight for survival. Outside is more than a zombie film, it is also a family drama from the beginning. It was clear that this wasn't just about zombies. The story follows Francis, played by Sid Lucero, who's trying to protect his wife Iris, Beauty Gonzalez, and their 2 young sons, Josh and Lucas. But the real tension comes from the cracks in Francis and Iris's relationship. You can sense their marriage is already on shaky ground, and the added pressure of the apocalypse only makes things worse. I found myself really feeling for Francis, who's obviously carrying a lot of trauma from his past. Flashbacks show that his childhood was rough, and his father was abusive, trying to force him to be a real man. That emotional baggage is clearly affecting how he handles the crisis. He's desperate for some sense of control, to give his family a normal life again. but it's pretty clear that his mental state is deteriorating. Watching him struggle with both his past and the current nightmare felt raw and realistic, making me care about his fate beyond just surviving the zombies. A fresh take on zombies sets Outside apart from the genre. What really stood out to me was the way the zombies were portrayed. Instead of the typical groaning and moaning, these zombies can speak but only repeat their last words before they died. At first, I thought it was a small detail, but as the movie went on, it became genuinely creepy. Imagine facing someone who keeps saying sorry or passport please over and over again, but in a mindless, dead-eyed way. It's very unsettling and still gives me goosebumps when I think of it, especially when the zombie is someone the characters knew before they turned. This twist on the usual zombie formula added an extra ounce of tension. It reminded me that these creatures were once people with lives, and now they're reduced to this eerie, repetitive state. That small detail made the encounters with zombies feel more personal and emotional, especially for the family. It wasn't just about running from monsters, but also about facing the terrifying loss of loved ones, perhaps even having to kill them a second time. One of the things I appreciated about Outside is how universal the story felt. Yes, the movie is set in the Philippines, and you can feel the intense tropical heat in many of the scenes, but this story of a family struggling to survive could have happened anywhere. Whether it's the Midwest, rural England, India, or any other part of the world, the common themes of family tension, survival, and personal trauma are things that anyone can relate to. I didn't feel like the film was tied to its location in a way that alienated viewers from other places. The setting felt almost secondary to the emotional and psychological struggles that the characters were going through, which made it easy for me to get invested in the story. Outside may be a bit too long, but it's still gripping, I'll admit. At over 2 hours, Outside could have trimmed down some scenes. There were moments where the pacing dragged a little, and I found myself thinking they could have wrapped it up sooner. That said, the movie still managed to hold my attention. There were enough twists and turns to keep me engaged, and just when I thought the story might slow down, something would happen that pulled me right back in. The family's encounters with the zombies and with each other get more desperate and intense as the film progresses, and by the end, I am fully invested in their struggles. Despite the slightly overlong runtime, I was able to feel and relate to the emotional weight of the journey, and that's what made the movie stand out to me. By the time Outside ended, I realized it was much more than just another zombie flick. What really drew me in was the emotional depth of the story. It's not just about running from zombies but facing inner turmoil and strange relationships. The personal struggles of the characters made the film feel relatable and gave it a surprising weight that I didn't expect. I loved the fresh take on zombies, but what hooked me was the basic human drama at the core. While I do think it could have been shorter, the film's psychological layers and raw emotions made it well worth the watch. It's not just about surviving the apocalypse, it's about surviving your own demons, and that's what sets Outside apart for me. Review 4. Designer may be compensated and/or receive an affiliate commission if you click or buy through our links. Featured pricing is subject to change. Now that summer is on its way and HBO Max is streaming new movies the same day they come out in the theater, it makes perfect sense that you may want to start bringing your indoor entertainment outside. Sure, creating an outdoor space to watch favorite shows, sports and films has always been a great way to celebrate longer days and warmer nights. But with COVID nipping on our heels, now is even a better time to have a safe space to hang out with friends and family. So why not start building out the perfect streaming nook on your deck, backyard or garden? Here are a few products to check out if you're ready to turn your outdoor space into a makeshift movie theater. This mid-range digital projector from well-respected Epson can project a picture up to 320 inches with 1080p. high-definition resolution. An update of the former Epson 760 HD, it's also portable, for indoor, outdoor uses, and comes with a new chip which ups its brightness and contrast. And for $600, this is a solid deal for a mid-level projector. It may be a little pricey, but if you're planning on spending time outside screening movies, TV shows and sports, this stunning, completely weatherproof TV is a must-have. Featured on Oprah's 2020 list of favorite things, this outdoor TV provides minimal glare in the sun and can withstand even the harshest weather. Take that, COVID. This 120-inch portable movie screen has 4.6 out of 5 stars on Amazon with nearly 17,000 reviews. But all you need to know is that it's compact, easy to store and carry, and is made with natural fabric that won't crease. We also love the simple setup, and if you plan on keeping it in one place, make sure to install it with the included ropes and hooks. If simple is the name of your game, this is the screen for you. This portable inflatable solar lamp doubles as a mobile charger, and we love how it adds flair to any setting as well as being easy to use, move around and keep charged. The neat, geometric crown inflates with a pull, allowing you to place it anywhere you need a little illumination. Comes with 5 settings, including the flickering candle, and will create up to 40 hours of light and 10 hours of charging time. You'll need an external speaker to complement your projector, and this solid choice from Ultimate Ears does the job. Not only is it loud, waterproof and yes, it's wireless via Bluetooth, but it also comes with a 3.5mm input to directly plug in your projector. That way, you won't have to deal with any delays from dialogue to screen. Plus, you get a super speaker for parties and hanging by the pool. Review 5. You're not free yet, not by a long shot, an unsmiling parole officer tells Chris J. Duplass, near the beginning of Lynn Shelton's new feature, Outside In. Newly released after serving 20 years for an only vaguely specified crime, Chris is pushing 40 and uncertain how to reclaim a life he left while still a teenager. His small section of rural Washington has barely changed. Whether he can still fit into it is another question. Freedom, and its negotiation, is Miss Shelton's subject this time out. She and Mr. Duplass wrote the story together, and the parole officer's admonition could apply to any one of the characters with whom Chris interacts. Chief among these is Carol, Edie Falco, Chris's former high school teacher and the prime instrument of his early release. Unhappily married to a cold man who disdains her volunteer work with prison inmates, Carol is unprepared for Chris's romantic expectations. Immature and inexperienced, Chris can't quite grasp that the feelings he nurtured while inside might not be shared. Exploring big questions through small, intimate moments, Outside In is a love story that prioritizes patience and pragmatism over passion. Slowly, Carol is noticing the bars of her own prison, the stultifying stasis of her life and the emotional desert of her marriage. That vacuum has alienated her teenage daughter, Hildy, a marvelous Caitlin Deaver, who escapes by making fantastical art in an abandoned house. Seeing it, Chris recognizes a lonely kindred spirit, and a friendship begins, a one that Carol is not entirely comfortable with. In a movie whose greatest tension comes from wondering whether Chris will violate his parole by drinking a beer, the actors need to be compelling, easily clearing that bar. Ms. Falco gives Carol a gentle kindness and the emotional intelligence to transform Chris's ardor into a catalyst. And anyone who's been watching the Amazon series Transparent knows that Mr. Duplass has a knack for playing fragile, wounded masculinity. He understands how to make a weapon out of guilelessness, and he uses it to make Chris so disarmingly bashful it's easy to miss how unreliable he might be. Shot in warm pastel tones and drizzly, mouse-colored light, Outside In is, like its characters, a little washed out. It's also less comedic in tone than most of Miss Shelton's previous features, the slow, straightforward style making it appear uneventful. Yet even if Chris and Carol's most exciting encounter spends more time in a bowling alley than a bedroom, their steadily shifting affection seems a small miracle of resilience and hope. Review 6. Outside, now on Netflix, poses the question, what's worse, the zombie apocalypse or mental illness? I'm not sure it has an answer for that, nor is there necessarily one to be had, but this Filipino twist on the traditional undead takeover formula sure ponders over the course of 142 minutes. Carlo Ledesma, who contributed a short to Hulu's scary season anthology series Bite Size Halloween, writes and directs this psycho-horror hybrid about a dysfunctional family that's trying to survive zombie attacks and each other, and the results left me scratching my head. The gist: we open on an old wedding video, from the before times, when happiness was a thing and undead people biting not yet dead people and turning them into undead people wasn't a thing. Then, cut to a battered and filthy car, covered in muddy, bloody handprints, its front bumper askew and flapping. Inside are Francis, Sid Lucero, and Iris, Beauty Gonzalez, and their sons, teenage Josh, Marco Masa, and young Luke, Aiden Tyler Padu. The tone is somber, quiet. I mean, you can't expect them to be playing the license plate game, because having fun in this setting just ain't happening. But the silence hangs in the air, all but suffocating this family. They reach their destination, a big, isolated farmhouse. Francis grabs a tire iron and takes his sweet time making sure the place is safe. He follows the buzz of flies to a bedroom where an old man with a bite on his arm has apparently taken his own life. Francis pries the pistol from his hand and heads down to the kitchen, where he finds an old woman zombie hissing at him. Her eyes are oil black, her skin pallid and ruddy with sores. "Mom?" he asks, and then he has to do the deed. Pow. And after that, he digs the grave. The man in the bed goes in too. That was his father. Meanwhile, Irish seems profoundly unhappy. Is it the death of the world? Goes without saying, I think. Or is something else piled on top of that? It soon becomes clear that the honeymoon is over for her and Francis. It's vague, but I think she cheated with Francis' brother, and he was a deadbeat who owed a lot of people money. This is their chance to start over, he insists. Debt doesn't follow a fella into the post-society world, so who says the apocalypse is good for nothing? But it doesn't solve the problem of deep-seated marital resentment that follows people all the way to the afterlife, I bet. So there's tension in the air as the fam roams the grounds, cleaning up, tending to some chickens, finding a dead body in a noose in the shed that Francis lets fall on top of Josh, traumatizing him. Father of the Year candidate right there. But you know what they say about the sins of the father, and that applies here, because in a dingy basement room next to an old generator is where Francis' father apparently used to lock him up and beat him. And yet, when Iris suggests they move on in hopes of finding a rumored military base nearby, and to get Francis away from the site of his youthful trauma, he insists they stay. You get it, but you also don't get it. It's a fine place for now, but it's not forever. Francis seems to disagree with its sentiment, though, strongly. What movies will it remind you of? Outside nods toward iconic zombie films Night of the Living Dead and 28 Days Later, but it eventually becomes The Shining, but with zombies. Performance worth watching. Gonzalez finds considerable complexity within Iris, finding earnest truth in a character who's unwilling to pretend everything's okay with her marriage, or her husband's mental state, even for the sake of her children. Memorable dialogue. Francis, in reference to how he stood by watching while Josh was traumatized by a corpse, he saw a dead body. He needs to get used to it. Sex and Skin, a brief non-nude kitchen shut-up sequence. Our take, 2 hours and 22 minutes is a lot of time to spend in the company of a lousy, irreparable marriage occasionally besieged by undead shamblers. Too much time. Let it be known, especially to goremongers, that Outside is more about surviving domestic strife than surviving hordes of zombies. Sure, it spikes here and there with some disgust-pating splatter violence, but this one ain't about the kills, bro. It's about lousy parenting and the psycho things from childhood that never, ever go away. And to be perfectly frank, the zombie stuff is rendered with more subtlety. Ledesma leavens the screenplay with some dreary subtext asserting that dodging and decapitating zombies is far from an adequate substitute for couples therapy. Bitterness and jealousy always claw their way to the surface, no matter how deep you try to bury them. The filmmaker indulges long-winded melodrama with the occasional virtuoso action sequence. Francis fighting a small battalion of zombies on a narrow bridge plays out in one long, exhilarating take, but the former consists of the majority of narrative weight here. And after a while, after Francis' screws get a little too loose for comfort, the film goes full hysterical, testing our endurance for over-exaggerated portrayals of insanity. I will say Outside is daring enough to explore the withered and ragged ends of its bleak story, which shows admirable ambition. But I can't say it's much fun, either. Our call. Skip it. Outside tries to do something different within typical genre boundaries, but it's ultimately a long, depressing and generally unpleasant experience. Review 7. In Netflix's psychological horror film Outside, A family of four escapes to the patriarch's secluded family farmhouse in order to get some semblance of normalcy back amid a zombie outbreak that has only left devastation in its wake. However, amid growing tensions from the situation outside, there's also a multitude of tensions growing inside the house as Francis starts to lose his sanity amid the psychological and emotional struggles that the family faces. The film has a runtime of 142 minutes. Calling Outside, the first zombie horror film from the Philippines on Netflix. A zombie film would probably be unfair. The film, a tense and dreary drama that likes to play mind games with you, gives us a horror that is a bit different from the traditional ones that we have come to watch on the platform frequently, leaving us more afraid of Sid Lucero's Francis than the mindless attackers outside who dream of eating your flesh. From the moment the film starts, you can quite make out that all is not well between couple Francis and Iris, whose slow-burn marital issues spark their sons Josh and Lucas to be quite on edge. The moment they reach his ancestral farmhouse in the middle of nowhere, however, is when things slowly start to get more and more uncomfortable. That's the thing about this film, it's so darn uncomfortable. You aren't afraid of what the zombies might do but can't help but feel that Francis might not be all there. Along with the brutality of Francis's mental health declining, we see a backstory of why he is the way that he is. Through very few flashbacks, it is made evident that he was mistreated by his father, so much so that any sort of challenge to his decisions makes him revert back to his childhood days. These subtle showcases of Francis's vulnerability and inability to let his family fall apart make him a complete character who is desperate and brutal but with reason. The harrowing reality of his surroundings doesn't give him much of an opportunity to have a normal, loving family, but he can't help but try his hardest, regardless of whom it may hurt in the process. The control he tries to exert over his family also results in a thoroughly emotional watch, tying the different points of the family unit together. One of the merits of the film is that regardless of the zombie outbreak, the film is still chilling. The toll unstable and unhappy parental figures can have on children and how it's important to break the cycle of abuse is ever relevant, which helps the film to give us something to be afraid of and feel some sort of sympathy for as well. Whether it be Iris or the children, everyone suffers because Francis hasn't come to terms with his trauma or his brother's preferential treatment, and these moments play into the story so well that it gives you chills. That being said, I am not sure why the film needed to be set against the backdrop of a zombie apocalypse. Sure, it heightens the fear and gives a reason as to why the family can't leave their house, but I feel like the film could have made a bigger impact without it. Plus, at 142 minutes, the film is too long. Sure, it packs the runtime with enough interesting and harrowing situations that will keep you engaged, but you do feel the weight of it. More so because the film takes forever to set the stage before things start going to hell. That being said, Netflix's Outside is acted extremely well, especially by Sid Lucero, who brings forth Francis's declining mental health to the forefront with chilling accuracy. You can't help but feel goosebumps whenever he is around, especially in the second half of the film. Young actors Marco Masa and Aiden Tyler Padu are fantastic as well and bring an innocence to the story that feels quite scary when you think about it all. Lastly, Beauty Gonzalez is great as well. It is clear that she is hiding more than she is letting on, and although nothing is ever explicitly said, her thoughts and her past indiscretions are quite clear thanks to her performance. The zombies aren't the scariest thing in this zombie horror film, and sometimes human beings, with all of their traumas, can be oh so dangerous and deadly. Outside is enjoyable and makes you think, but its extremely long runtime does catch up after a while. However, several intriguing aspects in the film are surprisingly unique, especially for a movie set against a zombie outbreak, and regardless of the long runtime, this one's thoroughly enjoyable. Review 8, Outside, 2024, the latest Filipino offering on Netflix, is a dense psychological drama set in the quick-fire world of the zombie apocalypse. It traverses the familiar grim reality of an apocalypse with a moderate dose of zombie-related dread and wanton violence. What writer-director Carlo Ledesma explores more in his film is the horror of childhood trauma, the festering of which creates a cycle of violence that is more terrible than any of the undead's actions. The price for such an attempt is the wrath of the fans of zombie films. Outside is bereft of pulsating zombie-killing actions that one is accustomed to in such films. Instead, It examines the frailties of human emotions and the ugliness of the very much alive. The film starts with Francis's, Sid Lucero, and Iris, Beauty Gonzalez, wedding video, earmarking the relationship to be the key subject in the story. Fast forward a few years and the Philippines is punched with a devastatingly grotesque viral outbreak. Like most zombie films, the infection spreads via the usual mode of getting bitten. Francis and Iris are weary and grizzled. They, along with their two sons, Josh, Marco Masa, and Lucas, Aiden Tyler Padu, travel through the beautiful countryside in a severely dented van. All signs point that the family has gone through turmoil. Upon Francis' insistence, the family takes shelter in his parents' farmhouse. Francis finds his father has taken the ultimate measure to avoid being a zombie. He shot himself in the head. Francis takes the gun, and the watch, from his father's corpse. The gun immediately proves to be handy, as Francis has to shoot his zombified mother in the face in the next turn of events. Once assured the house is free of danger, Francis insists on remaining there as he feels it is safer inside. As the story progresses, the past starts to unfold. Gradually, we realize why outside is different from the trademark zombie films. The apocalyptic present of the story merely acts as trigger, a scene upon which the horror, influenced by the past, takes center stage. Yes, the central characters often have to evade a horde of zombies, have to scour the field for food, and have to ration what they have. However, the bigger challenge for survival for them is themselves, primarily the patriarch, Francis. This is where Ledesma's story veers toward the shining territory. The house, where Francis spent his childhood, starts to change him. A limited, but cleverly infused, amount of flashbacks tell that Francis was abused by his father in that very same house. The scars of that can still be found as Francis often succumbs to night terrors. With each passing day, Francis starts to take after his father. The wheel of abuse from the dominant position of the patriarch begins to roll and starts to gather momentum as Francis' mental state starts to deteriorate. Outside is also a tableau of the aftermath of a marriage's deterioration. With each passing moment between them, Francis and Iris show it is not the apocalypse that has taken a toll on their relationship, it is they themselves. Both of them have made mistakes by their own admission. Mistakes, despite efforts from both of them, continue to be irremediable. Sid Lucero's Francis is a reluctant and refrained homage to Jack Torrance. Lucero is deft at being vulnerable and tormenting. Francis' constant efforts to keep his family chained to him are well explored by Lucero's portrayal. Beauty Gonzalez effuses the depression that Iris is going through. Gonzalez paints both the wariness of the perpetually aloof Iris and the absolute breakdown of the desperate-to-survive Iris with equal success. Despite not truly embracing the genre tropes, Outside is proficient when it comes to handling its zombies, grotesquely dolled up. The zombies in this film also carry a creepily eccentric tick. They constantly say their last living words. Francis' mother's decapitated undead body attacking him while saying sorry was a terrific start. The cinematography of Shin Fung Chung has to be lauded too. Whether it is drone shots of the lush landscape ravaged by the zombies, or the characters' isolated shots framed by the architecture of the menacing farmhouse, Chung's camera makes outside a visual delight. There is a particular tracking shot, where Francis kills and evades a pack of zombies over the bridge, which puts the cherry on top. It leaves the viewers wanting for more such actions. Outside is not the usual affair one might expect from a zombie-centric film, but, if you are in the mood for something different this Halloween season, it could be just what you need. Review 9. New to Netflix from today is the Filipino zombie movie, Outside. Written and directed by Carlo Ledesma, the movie stars Sid Lucero, Beauty Gonzalez, Marco Masa, and Aiden Tyler Padu, and follows the story of a family attempting to survive a zombie outbreak. In the movie, Francis, his wife Iris, and their two children Josh and Lucas are fighting for their lives. Zombies walk the earth, and the family are doing their best to avoid being bitten or eaten. Returning to Francis' childhood home, a beautiful old farmhouse, the family weigh up their next move. Iris is keen to push on and find other people, while Francis wants to remain at the farm where he believes it is safe. But the farm isn't quite the safe place Francis imagines it to be. Returning home unlocks some uncomfortable memories from the past, and being landlocked with the family isn't ideal either. Zombie movies are tricky things to sell these days, with so many in existence, and the endless cycle of Walking Dead shows telling countless zombie stories on a weekly basis. It is difficult to produce a zombie film which feels fresh. How do you convince audiences to spend time on your movie when they've seen it all before? Well, Outside attempts to hook its audience with some domestic drama in the hope this will get the interest levels up. Does it? A broken bar occasionally, but for the most part not really. While Outside makes decent attempts to offer something a touch more substantial in the story department, to ensure this film isn't just a rehash of the usual undead shtick, it doesn't quite work. The story isn't as strong as it needs to be, nor is it as compelling, and it's difficult to really become invested when the film spends the majority of its time not doing much. Outside is also quite a slog. The movie clocks in at close to 2.5 hours and it moves at a snail's pace, which doesn't help. When the film has occasional moments of action or spectacle, the scenes are okay, but they are few and far between. The movie is also not particularly scary or creepy, which robs it of a great deal of its horror. I appreciate this isn't really the focus of this particular zombie tale, but a bit more energy, excitement, or scares wouldn't hurt. Heck, a bit more of something dynamic would do this film the world of good. The simple thing is, Outside is a bit too slow and uneventful for its own good. It needs energy, a quicker pace, and generally a touch more oomph, and none of this really comes until the final 25 minutes when it takes a very dark turn. On paper, a domestic-focused zombie film like Outside could be interesting, and I really want to like it, but alas, for the majority of its runtime it's plodding and does nothing for me. I'm not convinced it'll work for the masses either, and I can't help but feel it's a bit of a misfire. The cast are fine, the picture looks good, and it has occasional moments that work, especially towards the end, but it's just not that great. Shame. Alex is a writer, editor, and blogger specializing in movies, TV, comics, retro toys, and general geekery. He is a championing voice in nerd content, an expert in pop culture, and a trusted movie critic who publishes new reviews on a weekly basis. After graduating with a degree in film television studies from the University of Derby in the UK, Alex went on to study journalism in Sheffield, before acquiring NCTJ accreditation. Prior to a career in blogging, Alex was a magazine editor, a senior copywriter, a features writer, and a freelancer. Thank you for taking the time to read this review on It's a Stampede. For more reviews, check out the recommended reads below. Now playing in UK and US cinemas is the supernatural horror sequel, Smile 2. The movie, written and directed by Parker Finney, stars Naomi Scott, Rosemarie DeWitt, and Lucas Gage, and follows the story of a pop star who finds herself experiencing a series of nightmarish visions. In the movie, Sky Riley is a musician and recording artist, who has been out of action for a year following a tragic car accident. Although she has mostly healed from the physical trauma of the accident, she has not quite healed mentally. However, Sky is doing the best she can to move forward and is keen to push ahead with new music and a tour. Problem is, she is addicted to pain medication and needs her next fix. Visiting her local dealer, Sky hopes to get her pills and leave without any fuss, but when she arrives she witnesses something truly unsettling. From here, Sky finds herself haunted by a strange and unexplained presence which appears to be impacting her already fragile mental state. Picking up shortly after the events of 2022's Smile, but focusing on a new lead character, Smile 2 is a simple and somewhat effective horror. Somewhat effective because while significant aspects of it work very well, more about that in a moment, the film will either hold your attention and satisfy you greatly, or you'll struggle with it and at times lose interest. I unfortunately found myself falling into the latter category, but I'm pretty sure plenty will fall into the former. As such, depending upon the journey you have with Smile 2, you may have a vastly different opinion of the picture. Either way, it's not bad, it's just not amazing either. As far as I'm concerned, it falls into mid-range territory which you can either take or leave. Similar to its predecessor, Smile 2 is about a female protagonist pursued by an unseen force which causes her to see disturbing imagery. This imagery eats away at her mental health, causes her to spiral considerably, and leads to plenty of mind-bending shenanigans. And it's here where Smile 2 is most effective. The film's exploration of mental illness and PTSD is pushed to the forefront of the picture, and everything that is conveyed on screen feels authentic. As the story progresses, Skye descends further into the depths of depression and despair, and the darkness in her mind is reflected by the darkness of the unseen force. A similar tactic was utilized in Smile, but here it feels more encompassing. Although I'd argue a significant reason why the darkness seems bigger this time around is due to actress Naomi Scott. She is the other very effective element of Smile 2, and arguably its greatest selling point. Smile 2 is essentially built around Scott, and she leads the film brilliantly. The actress is in almost every scene, and she helps to sell this picture as a very personal tale. Scott throws herself into the movie and gives it her all. Between Scott and the film's metaphor for darkness and depression, Smile 2 has the bones of something very strong. But if the film has the bones in place, why did it not quite win me over? Well, largely because I found it all a bit long-winded, plodding, and occasionally tiresome. While Scott is truly fantastic in the film and she sells everything she needs to, I'm not sure what's being sold is something I want to buy. Watching someone descend into darkness on screen might sound interesting, but 2 hours of it is not as entertaining as you might expect. A swift 90 minutes? Maybe. But 2 hours is hard going. Smile 2 also feels a bit like a movie that never quite gets going. This could be because it never quite grabbed me, or it could be because it needs to branch out into other spaces and environments than the ones we ultimately get in the story. Back when Smile was released in 2022, I gave it a fairly encouraging review and awarded the film 3.55. I liked a lot of what the original had to offer. It had some good ideas, and felt fresh. I'm not quite so sure about Smile 2. For me, it's a slightly lesser installment than its predecessor, which has some great elements. Once again, Scott is superb, and the movie boasts some excellent imagery, but it just doesn't work as I would like. However, others will have an entirely different viewpoint, which is perfectly fine. I am happy to agree to disagree on this one. Review 10. The Abel family, consisting of Father Francis, Mother Iris, and their 2 kids, Joshua and Lucas, flee a zombie outbreak in the city and arrive in the mansion belonging to Francis's parents, on a sugarcane plantation. While there, they find his father and a servant having committed suicide after being infected, and the mother being a zombie. Francis is forced to kill his mother, and gradually, the traumas he has suffered in childhood come to the fore. Furthermore, his marital situation is not particularly good either, with the combination eventually turning him into something extreme. Soon, the family realize that the zombies are not the only danger. Carlos Ledesma essentially implements the zombies here as an excuse in order to present a film that remotely reminds of Kisumata, although the father figure is definitely less horrible. Nevertheless, Francis's downward spiral is what is essentially the main element of the movie, with Ledesma including themes of mental illness, generational trauma, and how the parents' mistakes harm their children. It is this approach that dictates the dramatic aspect of the narrative and initializing a very appealing sense of tension which becomes even more intense due to the existence of zombies, whose presence and attacks are carefully placed in the timeline. The comment about interior enemies being more dangerous than the exterior ones could also be perceived in a number of political ways, with the same applying to the fact that all the drama is taking place in a sugarcane plantation, with all the implications, on an international level, the location implies. In that prism, the whole story could actually be perceived as a metaphor for the ways governments in crisis, during COVID for example, implement the concept of the outsider enemy in order to divert their people's attention, with outside also highlighting the impact this has on youths and the ways their actions can impact these tactics. All the aforementioned elements benefit the most by the acting. Sid Lucero is impressive in the role of a father whose desperation turns him into something horrific, while Beauty Gonzalez is equally good as the regretful and essentially unable to react mother and wife. The tension in their interactions, which is heightened by the presence of the kids and the zombies, is the highlight of their performances while also showcasing the great chemistry the two share. At the same time, and despite the layered and quite smart narrative, at 142 minutes, the film definitely overextends its welcome, with the lagging periods being many and extensive. Apart from this, however, the relatively fast pace implemented by the editing here works quite well, particularly in the moments it picks up and especially during the ending, which could have been handled better though. Xing-Feng Cheng's cinematography is one of the best aspects of the production, with him turning the mansion into a truly suffocating place, while giving the exterior a sense of danger and mystery that adds to the overall atmosphere here. The presentation of the zombies is also impressive, particularly the fact that they can talk, with the religious quotes they frequently utter also providing food for thought, in another smartly given comment. Although not exactly addressed to zombie fans, Outside works quite well as a horror/thriller/drama, with the subtext, the acting and the cinematography being its biggest traits. Review 10. Outside, 2024, the latest Filipino offering on Netflix, is a dense psychological drama set in the quick-fire world of the zombie apocalypse. It traverses the familiar grim reality of an apocalypse with a moderate dose of zombie-related dread and wanton violence. What writer-director Carlo Ledesma explores more in his film is the horror of childhood trauma, the festering of which creates a cycle of violence that is more terrible than any of the undead's actions. The price for such an attempt is the wrath of the fans of zombie films. Outside is bereft of pulsating zombie-killing actions that one is accustomed to in such films. Instead, it examines the frailties of human emotions and the ugliness of the very much alive. The film starts with Francis's, Sid Lucero, and Iris, Beauty Gonzalez, wedding video, earmarking the relationship to be the key subject in the story. Fast forward a few years and the Philippines is punched with a devastatingly grotesque viral outbreak. Like most zombie films, the infection spreads via the usual mode of getting bitten. Francis and Iris are weary and grizzled. They, along with their two sons, Josh, Marco Masa, and Lucas, Aiden Tyler Padu, travel through the beautiful countryside in a severely dented van. All signs point that the family has gone through turmoil. Upon Francis' insistence, the family takes shelter in his parents' farmhouse. Francis finds his father has taken the ultimate measure to avoid being a zombie. He shot himself in the head. Francis takes the gun, and the watch, from his father's corpse. The gun immediately proves to be handy, as Francis has to shoot his zombified mother in the face in the next turn of events. Once assured the house is free of danger, Francis insists on remaining there as he feels it is safer inside. As the story progresses, the past starts to unfold. Gradually, we realize why Outside is different from the trademark zombie films. The apocalyptic present of the story merely acts as trigger, a scene upon which the horror, influenced by the past, takes center stage. Yes, the central characters often have to evade a horde of zombies, have to scour the field for food, and have to ration what they have. However, the bigger challenge for survival for them is themselves, primarily the patriarch, Francis. This is where Ledesma's story veers toward the shining territory. The house, where Francis spent his childhood, starts to change him. A limited, but cleverly infused, amount of flashbacks tell that Francis was abused by his father in that very same house. The scars of that can still be found as Francis often succumbs to night terrors. With each passing day, Francis starts to take after his father. The wheel of abuse from the dominant position of the patriarch begins to roll and starts to gather momentum as Francis' mental state starts to deteriorate. Outside is also a tableau of the aftermath of a marriage's deterioration. With each passing moment between them, Francis and Iris show it is not the apocalypse that has taken a toll on their relationship, it is they themselves. Both of them have made mistakes by their own admission. Mistakes, despite efforts from both of them, continue to be irremediable. Sid Lucero's Francis is a reluctant and refrained homage to Jack Torrance. Lucero is deft at being vulnerable and tormenting. Francis' constant efforts to keep his family chained to him are well explored by Lucero's portrayal. Beauty Gonzalez effuses the depression that Iris is going through. Gonzalez paints both the wariness of the perpetually aloof Iris and the absolute breakdown of the desperate-to-survive Iris with equal success. Despite not truly embracing the genre tropes, Outside is proficient when it comes to handling its zombies, grotesquely dolled up. The zombies in this film also carry a creepily eccentric tick. They constantly say their last living words. Francis' mother's decapitated undead body attacking him while saying sorry was a terrific start. The cinematography of Shin Fung Chung has to be lauded too. Whether it is drone shots of the lush landscape ravaged by the zombies, or the characters' isolated shots framed by the architecture of the menacing farmhouse, Chung's camera makes outside a visual delight. There is a particular tracking shot, where Francis kills and evades a pack of zombies over the bridge, which puts the cherry on top. It leaves the viewers wanting for more such actions. Outside is not the usual affair one might expect from a zombie-centric film, but, if you are in the mood for something different this Halloween season, it could be just what you need. Review 11. In Netflix's psychological horror film Outside, a family of 4 escapes to the patriarch's secluded family farmhouse in order to get some semblance of normalcy back amid a zombie outbreak that has only left devastation in its wake. However, amid growing tensions from the situation outside, there's also a multitude of tensions growing inside the house as Francis starts to lose his sanity amid the psychological and emotional struggles that the family faces. The film has a runtime of 142 minutes. Calling Outside, the first zombie horror film from the Philippines on Netflix, a zombie film would probably be unfair. The film, a tense and dreary drama that likes to play mind games with you, gives us a horror that is a bit different from the traditional ones that we have come to watch on the platform frequently, leaving us more afraid of Sid Lucero's Francis than the mindless attackers outside who dream of eating your flesh. From the moment the film starts, you can quite make out that all is not well between couple Francis and Iris, whose slow-burn marital issues spark their sons Josh and Lucas to be quite on edge. The moment they reach his ancestral farmhouse in the middle of nowhere, however, is when things slowly start to get more and more uncomfortable. That's the thing about this film, it's so darn uncomfortable. You aren't afraid of what the zombies might do but can't help but feel that Francis might not be all there. Along with the brutality of Francis's mental health declining, we see a backstory of why he is the way that he is. Through very few flashbacks, it is made evident that he was mistreated by his father, so much so that any sort of challenge to his decisions makes him revert back to his childhood days. These subtle showcases of Francis's vulnerability and inability to let his family fall apart make him a complete character who is desperate and brutal but with reason. The harrowing reality of his surroundings doesn't give him much of an opportunity to have a normal, loving family, but he can't help but try his hardest, regardless of whom it may hurt in the process. The control he tries to exert over his family also results in a thoroughly emotional watch, tying the different points of the family unit together. One of the merits of the film is that regardless of the zombie outbreak, the film is still chilling. The toll unstable and unhappy parental figures can have on children and how it's important to break the cycle of abuse is ever relevant, which helps the film to give us something to be afraid of and feel some sort of sympathy for as well. Whether it be Iris or the children, everyone suffers because Francis hasn't come to terms with his trauma or his brother's preferential treatment, and these moments play into the story so well that it gives you chills. That being said, I am not sure why the film needed to be set against the backdrop of a zombie apocalypse. Sure, it heightens the fear and gives a reason as to why the family can't leave their house, but I feel like the film could have made a bigger impact without it. Plus, at 142 minutes, the film is too long. Sure, it packs the runtime with enough interesting and harrowing situations that will keep you engaged, but you do feel the weight of it. More so because the film takes forever to set the stage before things start going to hell. That being said, Netflix's Outside is acted extremely well, especially by Sid Lucero, who brings forth Francis's declining mental health to the forefront with chilling accuracy. You can't help but feel goosebumps whenever he is around, especially in the second half of the film. Young actors Marco Masa and Aiden Tyler Padu are fantastic as well and bring an innocence to the story that feels quite scary when you think about it all. Lastly, Beauty Gonzalez is great as well. It is clear that she is hiding more than she is letting on, and although nothing is ever explicitly said, her thoughts and her past indiscretions are quite clear thanks to her performance. The zombies aren't the scariest thing in this zombie horror film, and sometimes human beings, with all of their traumas, can be oh so dangerous and deadly. Outside is enjoyable and makes you think, but its extremely long runtime does catch up after a while. However, several intriguing aspects in the film are surprisingly unique, especially for a movie set against a zombie outbreak, and regardless of the long runtime, this one's thoroughly enjoyable. Review 12. Although George A. Romero didn't pioneer the concept of the zombie movie, he undoubtedly perfected it, especially with Dawn of the Dead. Ever since its success, this particular subgenre of horror has been hacked, slashed, killed, and resurrected from its grave for the big as well as the small screen. But how many of these attempts were truly refreshing? Shaun of the Dead is a personal favorite of mine as it used the zombie apocalypse to trigger a man's maturity. The use of found footage filmmaking to cover a zombie outbreak never got better than Wreck. Setting up a romance between a human and a zombie in warm bodies was pretty unique. Humans fighting zombies inside a train and Train to Busan was excellent. I can't speak to the quality of the film, but I think Pride and Prejudice and Zombies deserves a shout-out because it had the audacity to put zombies in a Jane Austen story. Anna and the Apocalypse was a fun time because it was a zombie musical. The topic of today's discussion, Outside, uses a zombie apocalypse in a pretty interesting way. But does that make it as memorable as the aforementioned films? Let's find out. Carlo Ledesma's Outside tells the story of the Abel family, which is made of Francis, his wife Iris, and their two sons Joshua and Lucas. By the looks of the decrepit van that they are traveling in, it seems like they have been through hell. They reach Francis' ancestral home, and Francis comes across his father's dead body. Going by the gun near him, it's apparent that the old man has died by suicide. A few moments later, the reanimated corpse of Francis' mother rushes to kill her own son, and that's when it becomes clear that the Abels are in the middle of a zombie apocalypse. After burying Francis' dead parents, Francis, Iris, Joshua, and Lucas begin getting comfy in their not-so-new abode. But that doesn't last long as the horrors of Francis' past and his childhood home begin to rear their ugly heads, thereby putting Francis as well as his whole family on edge. To make matters worse, Francis and Iris' marriage is falling apart for a controversial reason, thereby making survival at a somewhat secure location feel like an uphill task. Carlo Ledesma uses zombie apocalypse to talk about the horrors of patriarchy in Outside. I think this particular plot has probably been done in some episode of The Walking Dead, but this is the first time that I'm seeing it play out in this haunting way. Ledesma starts things off in a very cliché fashion where the father of a family takes on the role of the protector, but the slow devolution of that guardian instinct of Francis into something toxic and suffocating is nothing short of masterful. Of course, Francis' arc is a commentary on the long-lasting effects of abuse. However, I have to applaud Ledesma for striking fear into the hearts of bad parents by showing that if this cycle of mistreatment isn't put to an end, its repercussions can be deadlier than a zombie bite. As for the conflict between Iris and Francis, I think that your judgment of it will vary according to your ethics. However, no matter where you land on the spectrum of the discourse on adultery, Ledesma will test your humanity by simply asking if you prioritize survival over attaining some kind of moral superiority. In addition to all that, I really liked the callback to Dawn of the Dead, as the zombified minds of the humans are stuck in a loop where they keep repeating their last sane thought. It adds a layer of melancholy to the bleak atmosphere of Outside. Outside is a slow burn, and its runtime is 142 minutes. But it's pretty engaging through and through. Even though the zombie action is sparse, it never seems like you are watching something uninteresting because the family drama is as intense as a zombie encounter. I mean, sure, the stunt work in the bridge sequence is excellent. However, every scene where Francis unleashes the abuse he had received as a child on Joshua is so intense that it'll make you forget you're even watching a zombie film. The dinner table scene is probably one of the best dinner scenes in a horror movie, almost rivaling the one from Hereditary. I was surprised that nobody died by the end of that dialogue-heavy altercation. The use of the singular location, the old family home, is brilliant. From the moment they enter the premises to the moment the Abels prepare to vacate it, the place feels like a living thing that's influencing its inhabitants with its history and architecture. The select few scenes that take place outdoors are exquisitely shot and edited. The makeup on the zombies as well as the practical effects seem simple, but they are quite effective. The final act of the movie does overstay its welcome, but since it simmers with so many overlapping emotions, I can't help but give it a pass. Coming to the performances in Outside, I think every member of the main cast deserves some kind of award for their work. Sid Lucero is haunting in the role of Francis. Initially, he seems like a sweet guy who cares about his family and is ready to go to any lengths to make sure that they make it out of this zombie apocalypse alive. But the subtle ways in which he transforms into the film's main antagonist are simply mind-blowing. It's truly diabolical that he tries to get the audience to sympathize with him even though he is barely recognizable in the last act. But Lucero is so amazing that he almost gets you to side with him in those terrifying moments. Beauty Gonzalez is excellent as Iris. She actually starts off as distant and cold. It seems like she is not all that interested in this family outing, and that's what makes her evolution into the hero of the film so satisfying. Marco Masa and Aiden Tyler Patu are two of the most talented child actors that I have seen. I think that they have the acting chops to put a lot of method actors to shame. James Blanco and Chong D don't have a lot of screen time, but they are good. Every single zombie actor who is covered in all that gory and puke-inducing makeup, and giving a performance of a lifetime, deserves a round of applause. This week I watched a zombie film called Mads that tried to do something new with the subgenre by making it look like the whole thing has been shot in one long, uncut take. And while the effort put into pulling off that gimmick was impressive, it was fairly weak in terms of allegories and metaphors, which are elements that should be present in every good zombie film. So, that viewing experience made me apprehensive about Outside because I was worried about what it was planning to do over the course of its 2 hours and 22 minutes. Having watched it in its entirety, I am thankful that this movie exists because of the manner in which it takes a swing at the humans or the real monsters trope. I genuinely enjoy the feeling of dread that it managed to generate inside me through the portrayal of its zombies and Francis. The performances were amazing. It looked and sounded great. What more could I have asked for? Therefore, if you are a fan of family dramas and zombie horrors and you want a mixture of those subgenres, then please check out Outside on Netflix.